This stress-free moment's brought to you by Lewis Jewelers. Thank you to all the frontline and essential workers that have made it possible for Washtenaw County and Ann Arbor to open again.
Welcome to the Wolverine.com podcast, the Maize and Blue Breakdown. I am Clayton Sayfie here with Austin Fox. Obviously, sad week in college sports with the Big Ten deciding and the Pac-12 to cancel the fall college football season. The Pac-12 has canceled all sports through the end of the calendar year. Obviously, we're going to get into all of that. Before we do that, we want you to make sure to head over to the Wolverine.com. You can use promo code BLUE60, get all of our premium content over there for 2 months for free. Promo code BLUE60, you get all the breaking news surrounding Michigan football, Michigan basketball, recruiting. You get all the insider content that we have over at the Wolverine.com, promo code BLUE60. Secondly, sign up for the Wolverines' new daily in news newsletter. Go to bit.ly/UM newsletter, all lowercase, and sign up now. That is bit.ly/UM newsletter, all lowercase, and you'll get top headlines sent straight to your device. And finally, subscribe to this podcast. Again, you get our podcast sent straight to your device. Leave us a 5-star review. Give us some of your feedback there on iTunes or wherever you listen. But with that, let's just dive into the news. Obviously, by now, everybody knows that Michigan football will not have a fall season. There will be no Michigan football in the fall for the first time since 1882. Austin Fox, I'm dead inside. I am the Michael Scott gif of him saying, I'm dead inside. I don't really know what to feel at this juncture, I should say. I don't even know how to talk anymore at this point. And, we're about 24 hours removed from the decision, and I still am mad about it and really don't know how to feel. What was your reaction when you found out, and how are you feeling today?
I wasn't one bit surprised because we knew it had been trending in this direction for a bit, and we saw the writing on the wall. So I wasn't caught off guard at all when I saw it happen. So I'm basically just kind of numb to it because, again, I had accepted the fact basically because we knew that new Big Ten commissioner Kevin Warren didn't have the guts to try and make this thing work, and he came across as an absolute fool yesterday on Big Ten Network when he tried to defend the decision. But instead, the Big Ten, again, made a fool of itself, and they tried to be leaders and really nip this thing in the bud by not playing. But instead, they're just giving into peer pressure and doing what they think is best instead of doing what's right for these kids and letting these kids and these coaches and other medical professionals make their own decisions in this situation like they should have done.
Right, and it was fascinating to watch Kevin Warren on the Big Ten Network. I didn't watch the whole thing because I was doing other things as the news broke, and we were trying to get some things in order here. But watching some of the clips and reading your article on it, I mean, he absolutely dodged Dave Revson's questions in a lot of ways. And I think good on Dave Revson for, following up on a couple of them. At the same time, he's in a tough spot because he technically works for the conference over at the Big Ten Network, but he was pressing Kevin Warren a bit. They said they did what was in the best interest of the mental and physical well-being of these players. And I'm just not sure that's true, Austin. I mean, when you look at something that has been played in Ann Arbor, for example, since 1882, the default is to play football. The default is to find a way to play, however you can do that safely. Other conferences seem to have no problem finding a way to play. The Big Ten, on the other hand, Mark Schlissel, the president of Michigan, and some of the other presidents around the conference found a way not to play. And that's where the infuriation, I think, comes from people like Jim Harbaugh, from people like the players, the rest of the coaches. You saw it around the conference with the reaction. Gene Smith, the athletic director of Ohio State, was not happy with the decision. Either was Jim Harbaugh, Scott Frost, Ryan Day, a ton of these guys, because it's just really, in a lot of people's opinion, in most people's opinion, not the right decision. And to me, Austin, it felt more like they were looking out for themselves and the liability of what could possibly happen than it was about looking out for the player's safety. And that's, I think, where it becomes even more sad in a certain way that they were able to make this decision. And they said, hey, we're punting on this whole thing that brings so much good to our society and so much good to everyone involved in it, and even the trickle-down effect from there. So much good but we cannot find a way to play, so we're going to give up. We're going to cower in fear. And that's just a weird thing for me to say that the Big Ten, such a big institution, they didn't find a way to play college football. Now, we don't know if the other conferences are going to end up playing, but they're finding every way they can possibly do safely to play. The Big 12 today announced they're ramping up testing across their institutions. They're going to have testing 3 times a week instead of the 2 that was mandated by the NCAA. So they're trying to figure out how they can do it even more safe. The ACC, Dr. Cameron Wolf, a Duke infectious disease specialist, she's working closely with the ACC, and she believes they can play. She said, quote, "We believe we can mitigate it down to a level that makes everyone safe. Can we safely have 2 teams meet on the field? I would say yes. Will it be tough? Yes. Will it be expensive and hard and lots of work? For sure. But I do believe you can sufficiently mitigate the risk of bringing COVID onto the football field or into the training room at a level that's no different than living as a student on campus." And that is a medical expert. She works in the field of infectious diseases, and she's saying, yes, we can do this safely. Will it be hard? No, but what in this country, Austin, throughout our history has been easy. So I think it's just disappointing, especially on Michigan's level. We have Mark Schlissel as an epidemiologist, but he wasn't able to find something that could work safely, even though the other medical experts say that you can.
Yeah, it's an absolute joke, and I think it's nothing but BS when Kevin Warren and the Big Ten say that they made this decision with the players' safety and well-being in mind. That's absolute BS, and I think they were going to try and cancel this regardless. Like you said, they had no intentions of trying as hard as they could to try and make this thing work, even though you talked about the medical professionals and all the evidence and the research that they had where they said that this thing could work. For me, one of the biggest takeaways in that regard was Chris Hutchinson, Aiden Hutchinson's father, who has seen the worst of the worst in terms of this virus and been at the front of the lines. And he said clear as day, he made it clear to the public that he supports his son, Aiden Hutchinson, and his desire to play and the rest of the Michigan football team to play, because there was no doubt in his mind that they can make this thing work this fall on the football field. When you look at high school football teams around the state of Michigan and the fact that they're practicing and the fact that they plan on playing this fall, you're telling me that it's safe for them to play, but it's not safe for these college athletes and other Big Ten teams to play? Again, that's BS. We talked about Dave Refson and his interview with Kevin Warren on the Big Ten Network yesterday. I have all the respect in the world for Dave Refson because he does an amazing job, and he pressed Kevin Warren a little bit on some of these questions because Warren was dodging every single question that Dave Refson was asking. He came across as nothing but a politician, Kevin Warren that is, dodging all the questions that Dave Refson asked. One of them was whether or not a Big Ten team can play outside the conference this fall, and Kevin Warren wouldn't even answer that question. So he had no interest in providing any answers for us. And it's pathetic what he and the rest of these leaders, quote unquote, chose to do yesterday and the way they screwed all these kids, coaches, and families around the Big Ten Conference over.
Yeah, and you bring up a great point. You have Chris Hutchinson, who's an ER doctor at Beaumont over on the east side of the state here. And, he says, I've seen the worst of this COVID thing throughout my time here over the last 5 months, and I still support Aiden's decision to play. You saw Lisa and Ed McCaffrey, obviously the parents of Dylan McCaffrey, Christian McCaffrey, Luke McCaffrey over at Nebraska, but Christian, one of the best players in the NFL. They support their son's decision to want to play and not opt out of the season, and now it's all for a loss, now that they're not going to have it. But same with Peach Pagano, Carlo Kemp's mother, who is related to Chuck Pagano, obviously a longtime NFL coach. So these are people that are football people. Sure, you can say that and say that they might be blinded a little bit, but at the same time, Chris Hutchinson is a perfect example to bring up. And Jim Harbaugh, after the statements were announced by the Big Ten saying they're going to cancel, I want to read Jim Harbaugh's statement here because I agree with him and feel for these players, feel for the student athletes, the rest of the coaches, and Jim Harbaugh himself. I was thinking about him. He's probably meeting with quite a few players, and they had practice right after, which is awesome, I thought, and probably the most healthy way to blow off some steam in a way right after that decision. But man, I was thinking about him, and when he goes home or if he's driving home and he's by himself tonight or last night, but I was thinking, man, what his reaction is once he's done being strong for the rest of those players and he's able to sit back for the day and think, this is a guy that loves football and said at the age of 4 that he wants to play as long as he can, coach as long as he can, and then die. If you think football is not important, if you think it's just a sport, then in my opinion, you're dead wrong, because there's people like this that rely on it for a lot of what their life is. But I want to read his statement here. He said, quote, "Our student athletes and coaches want to compete. They have committed, trained, and prepared their entire lives for this opportunity, and I know how much they're disappointed at this time. I share in their disappointment today. We have shown over the weeks since returning to campus that we can meet the challenge and provide our student athletes the opportunity of a fall season. Our football team, our coaching staff, our support staff in Schembechler Hall have all stepped up, followed every rule, and done everything in their power magnificently to give all the opportunity to compete. I am extremely proud, thankful, and appreciative of our team and how they've conducted and represented our program and university." And Michigan has really been a model of what this was supposed to look like during this time. And Jim Harbaugh outlined some of those reasons last week with John Jansen on his podcast of how Michigan was doing it. They had visors, they had face masks. The linemen were going to wear masks under those protective visors and masks that would go through the face mask. So they were going to do everything possible. They were going to give them extra breaks to make sure that they were breathing properly. But you look at Michigan's testing numbers. The facts say this was safe, what Michigan was doing. There was no contract tracing that went back to the field. No one was contracting the virus inside the Michigan football facilities. They only had 11 positive tests out of 893 in the football program. No staff or no coach was positive the entire time. And then Jim Harbaugh the other day, before the decision was official, I think just, truer words have really never been spoken on this topic. But he said, quote, "This isn't easy. This is hard. It is proven that the conduct, discipline, and structure within our program have led to these stellar results. We respect the challenge that the virus has presented. However, we will not cower from it. We have developed a great prototype for how we can make this work and provide the opportunities for players to play. If you're transparent and follow the rules, this is how it can be done." Again, he said he's forever proud of his parents, players, coaches, and staff. And he said, in quoting President Theodore Roosevelt, "We do this so that our place will not be among the cold and timid souls who know neither victory nor defeat." Austin, that's exactly who made the decision yesterday. It was people that are cold and timid, that know neither victory nor defeat. And the last thing on this for me is when you look at Mark Schlissel making the decision for Michigan, obviously he was one of 14 to vote, but this was a risk-reward decision. And when you make a risk-reward decision, you have to weigh the other half, which is the reward. We know the risk. We understand, and Michigan has, in other Big Ten schools, have really mitigated that risk and really brought that down in quite a way by following the protocols that were set out by the Big Ten and their own institutions. But look at the reward and how much good, like I said earlier, comes out of college football. The opportunities for the players, the employment for the coaches, support staff, so many other people, what it does for the economy. So much good comes out of it. He didn't even come and talk to the Michigan football players, and obviously he did not share with Jim Harbaugh the passion for what college football does. And that's where the sadness comes in for a lot of these guys, and it does for me as well, because I feel for them. Because, fifth-year senior defensive back Tyler Cochran took to Instagram last night and basically said the incompetent presidents of the Big Ten institutions voted to cancel the season. He said it's not surprising that the input from the players was not there, because he's never seen Mark Schlissel in Schembechler Hall all of his 4+ years on campus. That's telling right there. The fact that you can make a decision about other people's futures. You said it earlier with the fact that you just want to give these kids a choice and the players a choice. Respect their decision if they don't want to play. But the fact that they made this decision without consulting the players in some form or fashion is downright disappointing. And in my opinion, I agree with Tyler Cochran. It is incompetent.
Yeah, Tyler Cochran absolutely nailed it. And the message that he sent out yesterday on social media, it is very disappointing the way that Michigan President Mark Schlissel handled this whole thing. We knew that he did not view athletics as necessarily one of the university's main priorities. And that came out yesterday, clear as day, when it was obvious that he wanted this football season canceled and he wasn't willing to take the quote unquote risks that would have come with playing a football season. Props to Jim Harbaugh, man, the way he has come out over these last few weeks and stated his opinion, because he has been spot on with everything he's said. Medical professionals have also agreed with him that these universities, especially at Michigan, are the safest places to play when considering they have professionals and higher ups telling these kids basically how to live and what to do and what not to do. And it's been reflected in the testing results. Almost nobody has tested positive at Michigan when considering well over 1,000 people have been tested, and very, very few have come back positive. So it's incredibly disappointing the way Mark Schlissel and Kevin Warren in the Big Ten handled this thing, because you know what they did? They gave in to peer pressure. And they made the easy decision. It wasn't the right decision, but they did what they thought was easy, and the Pac-12 followed suit. You know what? I'm with the ACC and the SEC and the Big 12 in the way they're forging ahead, because they want to play football this fall, and they want to make it happen, and they're willing to do whatever it takes to make that happen. So what a shame that we have leaders, again, quote unquote, excuse me, like Kevin Warren at the Big Ten, just giving in to peer pressure, because that's all this is. I'm sick of people like him telling others what they should and shouldn't think and what they should and shouldn't do. It's a shame that it came to this. And I feel most of all for the coaches and the players and the families around the Big Ten, because this is not just about athletics. It's people's livelihoods, it's people's lives, and it's their careers, and it's how they make a living. And we're going to see a lot of people in terrible financial shape because of this. Obviously not the coaches, because they make enough money, but we're going to see a lot of families who get screwed over because Kevin Warren and a lot of the Big Ten presidents decided to take the easy way out and give in to peer pressure.
Yeah, and I think that was beautifully said by you. I do want to bring up the other side of this, and the fact that the debate that has kind of gone on over the last few days, especially since it's ramped up with the impending decisions, and then, of course, the decision that they made. You hear about this heart condition that is linked with viruses such as the flu, such as COVID-19, myocarditis. I believe I am pronouncing it right, but basically it's heart inflammation that can be stemmed from having a virus. And people are saying, hey, that's too much risk. That's too much liability on the Big Ten's hands. That's too much risk and liability on the university's hands. But at the same time, we're turning around and saying that we can have students on campus this fall, which I believe that you can do, especially if you take some measures to make sure there's not too many in a room, et cetera, et cetera. But you're going to have students in classrooms and labs. You're going to have students in dining halls and things like that. Is this heart condition exclusive to football players? Because I don't believe it is. And scientifically, it's not. I've actually read up on it. It's specifically not exclusive to football players. It's exclusive to viruses such as COVID-19 and the flu. So this virus is going on. This heart condition is going to go on. And like Trevor Lawrence from Clemson started this movement, we want to play. We feel like it's the safest place for us is on the football field and in these buildings. And like Michigan has said, there's been no contract tracing back to Michigan's building. If that's the safest place and you have access to these world-class doctors and things like that, and players say, I don't want to go home and take online classes because the environment is not as safe and healthy, then why are we stripping that away from them because of some liability? And Doug Skeen said it really well on the Wolverine podcast right after the decision was made. Somebody's got to lead, and I'm glad the ACC, the SEC, and the Big 12, I agree with you. I'm glad that they're leading. Now, it may be devastating for the Big 10 in terms of what the Big 10 turns into. Maybe they won't be a power conference anymore. I think that's a stretch. But at the same time, you have people that are serious about finding solutions. The Big 10 seems serious about, like you said, making the easy decision. I think the safest place for these kids is being tested 2-3 times a week and having access to world-class doctors. I cannot be convinced otherwise at this point with the evidence that is in front of us. I really cannot. And I think, good for those other conferences for wanting to play. Do you think they get off with a season and are able to finish it, Austin?
I wouldn't be surprised one bit if they do. Yes, I feel like that they can pull it off and that we might just see a season around the ACC, SEC, and Big 12. That's obviously not official or even close to happening yet, but over this next month or so when this season is scheduled to start on September 26th, I would not be able to see these teams make it work because I think this whole thing is blown way out of proportion when talking about the risk quote unquote, the risks that come along with potentially playing football, because so many people have made it clear, medical professionals included, playing football and being on campus are the safe places. Sorry, my throat's killing me today. Are the safe places to be this fall. So what a pathetic thing that the Big Ten did yesterday when they canceled the season. My favorite aspect, what Jim Harbaugh said over the past week or so, was that we are not going to live and cower in fear. And I think a lot of people need to take that to heart, because there's a difference between being safe and cautious and being paranoid and putting your life on hold. And too many people have done that. And I think that it's time they grow up, because I think it's immature when you do that. So that's why I hope these football conferences make it work, and the Big Ten sees what a colossal mistake they've made by canceling this football season.
Yeah, and I respect any individual's decision to cower in fear. You don't even need to call it that, but in terms of an individual making a choice, but as an institution, as, a leadership in terms of university presidents, commissioners, board of regents, if they were involved at all, you're a leadership group and you're choosing to just punt and not lead. Again, individuals can make their decisions, and I support that 100%. If you want to stay inside, or if you want to not play because of this, I fully support that 100%. But I feel like other people that aren't in the shoes, that didn't consult the players and the people actually participating in this, canceling it on their behalf is just flat out wrong. I want to also touch on like some of the Michigan players that are going to be most affected by this. You wrote an article about how Nico Collins is projected the number 18 overall pick in the 2021 NFL draft, which doesn't seem so far away now, Austin, now that we don't have a football season at Michigan, at least in between now and then. But the players most affected by this, I don't blame one bit. If, and they said they're going to try to play a spring season. We can talk about that as well. I don't believe that's going to happen. But when you look at maybe guys like Nico Collins, Kwity Paye, Ambry Thomas, we're never going to see these guys suit up for Michigan football again, in my opinion. That's sad, because they were ready to break out and be those guys that lead this Michigan football team. They're stripped of that opportunity. And I don't blame these guys one bit. If there is a spring season and they say, hey, I don't want to play, I want to get ready for the draft, they came back and signed up for fall of 2020. They got that taken away. I wouldn't blame anybody one bit. If they do get a chance, Carlo Kemp, add him into that group, but if they do get a chance to play next fall and they say you can still be eligible, I don't blame those guys one bit for saying, hey, thanks, but no thanks, because, again, they committed to Michigan football in fall of 2020. I understand their decision. You have a life to move on to, and they got to continue with their lives. Just because the Big Ten made this regrettable decision, in my opinion, doesn't mean those guys, need to pay for it, in my opinion. So, Austin, who does this hurt the most out of Michigan? And I know it's sad to me to even say those names, that we're never going to watch them on a Michigan football field most likely again.
Yeah, it hurts the guys like Ambry Thomas and Carlo Kemp, some of these guys who are veterans on this team and won't have another chance to come back, and who aren't necessarily surefire NFL draft picks. I think Carlo Kemp, off the top of my head, falls into that category. Most of all, a guy like Nico Collins is going to get drafted. A guy like Kwity Paye at defensive end is going to get drafted. But again, you have some of these other veterans on this team who were going to have one more shot to go out in 2020 and prove to NFL teams what they can do, and hopefully raise their draft stock and maybe get drafted this April. But now they won't have that chance. Brad Hawkins, a senior at safety, is another great example. So it really screws these kids over, and I don't know if they'll now have a professional future in the NFL because of this decision that the Big Ten made yesterday.
Yeah, and I want to, last thing, to touch on some of the other people affected by this. When you look at this decision, the headlines are all, the Big Ten canceled football season. And that's true. They canceled the fall football season, whatever. They might try to play fall sports in the spring, but they canceled all fall sports yesterday, which is another decision I thought was not nuanced at all. Some of the sports that go on in the fall, hear me out, cross country, which is just running outside. I know you're part of a team and sure you travel and here and that, but are they saying no one's traveling, no one's in a group, no one's running outside? And then golf has a fall season as well, men's and women's. They are not able to participate. So they just punted on everything and decided that life cannot go on. We find a way to cancel life as we know it instead of find a way to play and give these opportunities that we otherwise think are good, right? That's why we have them, but we punt on all of them. and say no cross country and no golf. Those are the two activities that everyone's been allowed to do the entire time, even here in Michigan with some of the stringent measures we had. Austin, please tell me why there's going to be no running outside for these athletes and no golfing. You think the golfers aren't going to golf?
Well, think of how dangerous it is on a golf course when you're standing by that ball ready to hit by yourself with nobody really that close. It's an absolute joke when you lay it out that way. Cross country running as well. You think of these athletes running out in the country by themselves with obviously people not very close to them. Oh, but apparently that's too dangerous as well. The whole thing's a joke. People need to stop making decisions for other people and let these athletes and higher ups make the decisions for themselves. And honestly, I'm flat out sick of it.
Yeah, and just again, the fact that Tyler Cochran came out and said that, I think, bravo to him saying that he disagrees with the decision. He came back for his 5th year to live out that dream, play another year at Michigan football. And again, it's about more than just the football players and coaches. It's about the coaches in the non-revenue sports, and it is about the jobs. You said the coaches will be fine. That's true in college football, but that's not true necessarily in some of these other sports. So I want to give them a little bit of that limelight as well. I'm glad we touched on it because, I mean, when you look at canceling every single fall sport, I just don't see the reasoning there. And the fact that Mark Schlissel did not consult these players and Kevin Warren didn't really meet with these players about what they think about this, because again, this is a risk reward decision. You only factored in the risk. You missed 50% of the other factors you need to look at, because if we made every decision based on risk alone and no reward, we'd never leave our houses. You have to weigh the rewards. I think it's just a huge miss by the Big Ten. And again, I understand the other side. I respect everybody's opinion to say this is the right decision, because there are a lot of people that think that as well. But I think they should respect the fact that we have the position we do, and we're able to voice it, because I applaud everybody being in on this discussion and talking about it and trying to find the solutions. Again, it's about solutions. It's not about finding problems with what could possibly happen. It's about finding solutions. Bravo to the ACC, SEC, and Big 12. And farewell to Big Ten football. Austin, what's the favorite? What's the thing you're going to miss the most this fall without Michigan football?
How do you even narrow that down to one thing? It's impossible to come up with a single answer. It's going to be turning on College Game Day in the mornings on Saturdays, although I guess, well, we may potentially still have that, but obviously no Big Ten teams involved. It's going to be tailgating on the golf course or wherever else in Ann Arbor around that Michigan stadium and making the walk to that stadium and hearing the band come out of the field and the players come out of that tunnel, and the way we get goosebumps every single Saturday, and hanging out with friends and family after a big win, a big Michigan victory on those fall Saturdays. So we obviously won't have any of that. And it's an absolute shame, and it's devastating to think about, but just think of how bad these players and these coaches must feel in this situation. So it's really a depressing situation all around, and it's really sad that it had to come to this.
Man, you gave me chills just thinking about what college football really is around the fall, and I've thought about it a lot over the last day, just what we are going to miss out. And you said it best with, you think about the players and the opportunities they're missing out. We're missing out on some fun. I know this is our job, so it's a little bit more for us than the average fan as well. But the fans are feeling bad about this. The fans hate it. I mean, imagine what the players are feeling. So it's just a dark, dark time in college sports, especially around the Big Ten. And hopefully, it doesn't have to be that way. Those teams in the South, sure, they're going to have an advantage over the Big Ten in the coming years, probably from the fallout of this. Basically a self-imposed death penalty like SMU had, except it wasn't self-imposed back then. But this is going to be a real unfortunate deal here for the Big Ten, in my opinion. And we'll see what happens going forward. We'll continue to cover it here at the Wolverine. But Austin, great thoughts here today. That is our podcast, folks, for this week. We'll talk to you next week and every week following.